there, you're watching Gardens and Graveyards, and my name is Charisma. Today we're in the studio and we're going to do some cuttings. It's a typical spring day in Oregon, and one minute it's bright and sunny, and the next minute or very next second it's pouring down rain. Sometimes it's blue skies and sunny and pouring down rain. That's what our springs look like around here. So I wanted to share with you the process of doing cuttings, and it's time to do that while the herbs are in active growth. Today I'm doing cuttings on herbs. A few days ago I cleaned up my medicine garden, assessed some herbs that I wanted to take cuttings of and propagate, and today was a good day to get out there and grab those. But I didn't bring my camera with me because it was threatening to rain, and I'm really glad that I didn't, because by the time I was done picking up the cuttings or cutting off plants to get cuttings from, it was pouring down rain. So I came in, dried off, got set up in here so we could actually do the cuttings in here. But I have this whole tub filled with all kinds of different herbs to try to propagate. So that's one way that you could do that, especially with hardwood cuttings, and I'll explain that in a minute. But with hardwood cuttings, you can even clip them from, you know, your grandmother's garden, your best friend's garden, or a neighbor that lets you take a cutting off of their, like, rosemary bush or their lavender shrub, or, you know, any kind of hard stemmed plant. You can cut. You could either wrap it up in some a napkin, a wet napkin, and wrap up the stem, and then just try to keep that stem a little bit moist. But with hardwood cuttings, like with rosemary, let's see, the wood is very, or the stem is very woody. So you see how it's not flexible? And this won't dry out for a good long time. It's getting a little bit wilty. It's been maybe, I don't know, a couple of hours since I cut them, and then I did some things, and so some of these herbs are going to look wilty. They're not fresh from the garden. But it takes them a long time before they really dry out. Now, if I put this in some water, it's going to bounce right back up. So I'm not worried about them. Anyways, I just cut big branches of things, basically pruned some things that I needed to prune still, and brought the whole branch inside, and then we'll take individual cuttings from the branches in here. It was just a way for me to get out there and get them. I didn't need to be selective because all of my herbs are pretty robust, and I didn't need to be really careful with just getting exactly what I needed for the cuttings. Now, I'm going to be making a lot more cuttings than I normally do. One, there's a few plants that I want to replace in my own garden, and two, I'm going to be donating a bunch of plants, if they take, to a plant sale for the local Master Gardener program. Now, if you live in the United States, you probably have an extension program, Master Gardener program in your county. Look them up, find out if they exist. They're a great program to join, and they're just a great community organization that teaches about gardening. Oftentimes they have community classes. Many times they have fundraiser sales that are all about plants, which I find very exciting. I actually travel around our state and go to different Master Gardener county extension plant sales because they're all a little bit different. They all offer something unique. And so I enjoy going to different ones. I'll probably bring this channel, Gardens and Graveyards, along with me this year, and go to a few different Master Gardener plant sales and share with you what that looks like in case you ever, were wondering, is this only for Master Gardeners, or what is this? Because certainly before I started attending them, I thought, oh, those plant sales are only for like professionals and masters. No, they're the masters growing for the public. So, that's my little blurb on Master Gardener. So go check them out. Just go to your county extension office and they'll probably have a link for them, or you give them a call and they'll be able to get you in touch. It's kind of like 4-H for plants. Anyway, let's get into this. There's lots of different ways that you could do cuttings. Today I have made a propagation box with perlite. That's it. Nothing else. So I shared this with you before. It's just perlite. It's basically, it's a natural occurring, I think it's volcanic and a bunch of other things. There's calcium and there's a couple of different sodiums. There's just like a lot of, it's basically a rock that they blow up and make puffy, and it turns into this super fluffy, super porous medium that you can use. And I use this in my potting soils to give the potting soil some air. But today it's just straight perlite. So there's, a couple of inches of perlite on the bottom of this clear tote. Does need to be clear because you want some light getting into it for the propagation. There's other ways that you could do cuttings. You could do them in water. You could do them in a sand mixture. And I'll probably show those along the way, but today we're doing them in perlite. Now, I have done this method with houseplants, and I was very successful, but I've not done them with outdoor garden plants. I have, kind of, only in the fact that I have used straight perlite with maybe 2 inches of potting soil. So it's 2 inches of potting soil, and then 6 or 8 inches of perlite in 1 gallon containers, and I put hardwood cuttings in them. I've done hydrangea, I've done canomales, which is a flowering quince, I've done escallonia, butterfly bush, maple, salal, I don't know, a few others that took just fine to this method. So I'm very confident that the herbs will take to this method. I'm just hoping that in a bigger box I could just get a lot more lined up. My goal is at least 10 of each plant. If I get more, excellent. I have golden oregano, which this is a softwood cutting and it's already very wilty. I think I might have to I put them in water. I think that's gonna work, actually. I have Artemisia or wormwood, and I put these ones in a little bit of water to give them some hydration because they were starting to wilt. But I have a lot more back here, and we'll try those out too. So I have Artemisia, I have rosemary, I have purple sage, and and then I have a lavender, which I need to replace that lavender. All the other shrubs and perennials are pretty good in my garden. I do want to get a couple of Artemisia plants for myself. The rest I will get donated. And then I definitely hope that I can get the lavender redone. I've shared a couple of times with that yellow lavender that I have in the medicine garden was just old and woody, and it had to be removed this year. So I do have what was looking decent. It's like tips that have new growth on them that I'm hoping will propagate for me. It was a beautiful lavender. It had a yellow margin on the leaf, and then it was a yellow lime green chartreuse flower, which is really unique and fun because most lavenders are purple and there's a couple of pinks and white, but this beautiful yellow green color was just stunning. So I'm hoping I can get some cuttings of that successful. And another couple things that I'm going to mention before I get started is with a softwood cutting, which is typically, so for example, with the Artemisia, you could see that it has this hard stem, again, that is not very flexible. It's considered a hardwood, right? But I could go up further into it. This might not be a good example. I could get up into some of these. Okay, so let me see if I can get a better example. Well, okay, this one's a little bit better. I could go up a little bit further into this, and instead of using this part, which is woody, I can get up into this part, which is far more fleshy and would be considered a soft wood. You could see that it's soft and bendy. So I could get up in here and use the softwood cutting. Now, some plants take better to softwood cuttings, some plants take better to hardwood cuttings. You just kind of have to play around with that. You could look on the internet and find out what works best for the plant that you're propagating. For today, we're going to do all hardwood cuttings. When you're doing softwood cuttings, you really need to use a super clean, brand new, preferably, razor blade. And the reason for that is they're so soft and delicate that when you use pruners or scissors or something that has a bypass, like these, you know, where the blades do this instead of cut like this, you have the potential of smushing all of the little cells inside of your softwood cutting and damaging them. When you use a razor blade, you just slice right through them. It's very like, you know, a scalpel on the human body, just very delicate and cut straight through rather than doing any damaging cuts. When you're doing a hardwood cutting, it's not as important. They're not as delicate. And you can absolutely use a razor blade if you choose to. I'm not that particular about it. I do find that something really sharp and small that's going to snip right through is important. It needs to be sharp. You don't want to be hacking these things. That would cause too much damage. And then you want to make sure that you're cleaning your tools in between each type of cutting. I'm not going to worry about it between every single cutting. Now, if you were in a propagation, you know, if you were propagating in a commercial, you would probably wipe your blade between every single cutting. I know my plants are clean, and I'm just not that worried about it. I haven't had that kind of failure in my cuttings to worry about transferring disease from one cutting to the next, but I will wipe down my tools between each type of plant. And then the other thing is a lot of herbs can get really sticky and gummy, and so, you know, watch that. Make sure that if you're doing a whole bunch of cuttings of something, that even if you're not cleaning your tool between every cutting, you want to make sure that they're staying gum free and they're still really, you know, sharp. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Oh, another thing that you can do to increase your rate of success is dip your cuttings in rooting hormone. And that is a great tool and mechanism to use, but I really love to see what I can get away with not using a bunch of extra stuff, because I want gardening to be fun and easy and available at all times to everyone. So, you know, not everybody has a jar of rooting hormone hanging around. And again, I have found that my success with cuttings, especially hardwoods in perlite, it just wasn't that necessary to do the rooting hormone. So I'm going to try not using any hormones, not using any soil. It's just perlite and hardwoods, and that's it. And then once they're in here, I'll spritz them down with some water, and I'll put the top on to create sort of a greenhouse effect. I won't snap down the sides because I want some moisture to be able to naturally evaporate. So I'll just kind of barely, you know, tweak this a little bit so that there's air going in. And we'll see how it goes. We don't want them to rot or anything like that, so that's important. If I find that things are getting really dry, I can certainly close them up. This is great for transportation, but I will kind of just allow them to vent. So let's do this. One of the things that you want to watch is some of these really big leaves. You don't need them for propagation, so you can cut those off. And just have this. This is really all you need. And if you want, you can save your trimmings, not necessarily the hard pieces, but you could save the trimmings and use them. One of the benefits of taking these lower stems off is you're creating scars in your stem, and roots will come out of each one of these spaces where leaves were removed. Potentially. And this is why I'm not as worried about them being wilty, because I can just remove all of those ones, and then this is what's going to go in to the box. So we have this big clump, and we're going to just strip down. Essentially, all the rest of the cuttings go exactly like this. Just strip down the stem, get rid of any large leaves, leave a couple of green leaves on your cuttings, because that's how they'll photosynthesize and send energy down through the stem to create roots in the perlite or the soil, whatever medium you're using. So you do have to leave a couple of leaves, but literally you only need like 2 leaves for a viable cutting. what a little piece from the garden looks like. And just get rid of this piece. And then come in here and look for good pieces like this one. These ones. If you didn't need to prune your plant and you just wanted to take a couple of cuttings, this branch could have been left in the garden, and then I could have just taken a handful of these little offshoots off the branch to create cuttings. So maybe if I only needed like 2 or 3, I could have just gone in there and clipped those right off the branch and then use them. We're going to take off the big ones. Look like heavy. And we're left with that. See how that goes. We'll do rosemary now. These have a very woody stem, and so something that can help beyond just removing the little leaf nodes, you can, pull these off. It leaves a little leaf node scar there, and that's where roots will come out potentially. The other thing you can do is expose some cambium and just scrape the sides a little bit. Just open up that wood just a tiny bit, and you see how we expose some cambium, some green. That will allow the plant to grow some roots as well. And then we'll just stick them in there like that. This might be too tall. Because rosemary grows on one stem and doesn't really branch very much, it was super easy to just quickly cut the tips of the rosemary branches and use those tips for cuttings. I just basically stripped off the last 1.5 inches or so of the wood and stuck it right into the perlite. There wasn't a whole lot of trimming that needed to be done. With this type of a plant, you don't want to strip down too many leaves. And then I realized that I wanted to rearrange my box a little bit, so I had to move my rosemary over, and it was mostly just about spatial area and the types of plants that were growing. Like the artemisia and the rosemary had a lot of fluff to them, and I knew that the next plants that I was going to be doing were going to be really small, and so I wanted to give the rosemary and the artemisia some space to breathe. And you want to make sure that there's plenty of air circulation going on in your propagation box. You don't want to crowd your plants so much that you end up with like any kind of bacteria or fungus trying to grow in that moist environment. The next plant that I put in here was culinary sage, a purple variety, which again was really easy to do. Typically I use alcohol swabs to clean off my snips, but I just had Clorox wipes in the studio, so I use that. Basically, you just want to make sure that they're clean and not gummed up, and that's what I was doing here. Well, I don't know about this lavender because it just looks really dried out. what I'm trying to do is find the most flexible, brightest green pieces. I basically just pulled the whole plant out of the ground, cut the 2 branches that had some green left on them, and brought them inside. Now that they're inside and I'm taking a closer look, I just don't think that there's anything viable, but I'm gonna try to remove all of the dead tips and stem, scarify these woody stems a little bit, and hope for the best. I just don't know if it's going to come through or not. They're just so dry. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses and buy a new one. Okay. This is what the branch looked like. So you can see there's like barely sort of some green, but really just not enough to try to propagate off of. Even the pieces that are green feel a little bit crispy, like they dried right on the stem. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maybe cuttings off the lavender. I did get a little over 20 of the artemisia. I got 20 of the purple sage, and I think I counted 17 of the rosemary that fit in here, which is great. That's fine. The rest of these herbs, I'll just strip off the stems. Even though this lavender is not good for cuttings, it's great for tea. I'll just strip them off the stems and put them in a jar and use them for my tea. Same with all the other, this is culinary sage, the purple sage. So pretty, isn't it? With the greens and the purples. It smells so good. It smells so good in here, you guys. I wish I could, transport smell over YouTube. But rosemary, lavender, sage, artemisia, very potent herbs, and they smell so strong. It's pretty awesome in here. Anyways, all the rest of the herbs that I didn't use for cutting will just end up in jars and in either tea or in some kind of medicine or some kind of food. Nothing's gone to waste here. Oh, I encourage you to try your own cuttings, and especially if you're at a friend's garden or a relative's garden or even a neighbor. Just ask. If you see a plant that is just stunning or really speaks to you and you want it in your garden, see if you could just take a cutting, take it home, try to grow it, and that's the best way that we can spread our joy of gardening. Because let me tell you, I know where each one of these plants came from. My rosemary was a gift from a local gardener who wanted to remove her giant rosemary. I took the whole plant home and rejuvenated it, and it's in a spot that it could get as big as it wants, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm really grateful that I got to know that woman through this rosemary. The purple sage was grown by a master gardener. The artemisia was grown by a local farmer. And then I got them as starts and put them in my garden. The same with the lavender was also grown by a master gardener. I bought that at a master gardener plant sale. So none of these have like big stories, but I do remember where my plants come from, especially when there's, you know, an attachment. You put a grower's face to a plant. It just means more to. It means more to me. I assume it probably means more to you or other gardeners out there. When those plants are, you know, it's like traveling plants, right? So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and ring the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and we will see you in the next one. Until then, make sure you're out celebrating life every day.